Welcome to Checks and Balances. I'm Michael Vincent. This is James Blair. And this week, we fight the stigma. We battle the social pressure. You're 40. Should you buy your first home or keep renting?
So buying your first home, sign of success in New Zealand. If you don't buy your first home, if you're renting, what are you doing? We're starting to see more 40-year-olds coming to us and going, Mike, I've got a deposit for my first home. I'm ready to rock and roll. Today, we've got a case study going, hold the show. Is this actually financially the right thing for you to do, depending on your goals? Mike, it is happening more and more, isn't it?
Yeah, and it happens for like a variety of different reasons, I guess. You know, sometimes people have just traveled a bit when they were younger. They've sort of waited a little bit to meet their right partner, maybe, something like that. They need a lot of time to save a really large deposit. Unfortunately, we're seeing quite a few people at this age who have been through a split.
So they found the right partner and then they weren't the right partner.
So that's sort of, while it's not their first home, it is still their first home because they're in the same position as a first home buyer. And some people just a little bit take a little bit longer to get to that point, a little bit slower off the mark, not so financially literate, or just have other priorities.
Yeah, and if we kind of think about these people that in their lives have potentially got kids at schools, a lot of their friends have already bought homes. They're thinking, I need to really kind of get on with the show and buy my first home. And Mike, we're going to have a very kind of balanced discussion depending on your goals. But there are, mortgage broker, this isn't going to be surprising that you're going to talk to us about the benefits. There are a lot of benefits about buying your first home, isn't there?
Yeah, look, it's getting on the property ladder. We've talked about this 100 times, right? But I think,
Give it to us one more time.
Look, the capital gains you're going to get when the market's growing, and we're not talking 20% per year last couple of years. We work 5% per year on average growth. Generally speaking, you can't be kicked out of your own home like you can out of a rental. It's a little bit more secure, and especially if you've got kids, you kind of want that security. The ability to leverage is a really important point here, because you might be putting in $100,000 buying $1 million asset, and you're getting the returns off the $1 million asset, and then just it's a little bit less uncertainty, right? Like we sort of said, there's a lot of social pressure on owning a house or a couple of houses in New Zealand being the mark of success, and that is a real thing for a lot of Kiwis. Hey, I'm still renting may not be such a good thing to say around the barbecue.
Yeah, not good for the Instagram posts. Look at me in front of my new rental. Unless you own 30 of them. But the other pieces, which you're not thinking about at 40, but fast forward down the line, do you really want to be renting at 80? Where kind of, imagine if your landlord's like a moving house and you're going, this is not good. So even being behind the 8 ball in terms of getting onto the property ladder, the natural instinct is to get on there, get on with the show. But Mike, a bit of a stigma in terms of everybody is seeing 25-year-olds, 27-year-olds, 30-year-olds buying their first home, which we think is the norm. But what is the average age that Kiwis are buying their first home?
It's 35. Which is probably a bit later than people reasonably expect. But I think, again, it's probably has a little bit to do with social media as well, around sort of the average age people think get onto the ladder. But actually, no, it is 35. And again, if you are 33 and all your friends have kids and have houses and that sort of thing, you aren't actually behind the 8 ball. You're still, could make it in terms of hitting that average.
And just going on a very quick, I promise you this will be a quick side rant. What you see people doing in terms of the houses they are living in, the cars they are driving, their Instagrammable life, you have no idea what's happening behind the scenes. You have no idea how much help they've been given. You don't know if it's all about to crumble. Focus on your situation, your goals, your financial plan, what is right for you.
Oh, I love this. I saw, what was it, the other day on Instagram, and it was like someone had called out the social media like influencers post, because it was like she had taken a photo of her laptop and she was like hard on the grind or something, and like in her emails it was like, this bill is overdue, you're late on this rental repayment for like a storage unit and all that sort of stuff. And I was like, and you look at the Instagram, it's like Dubai, Cayman Islands, London, and I was like, finally, like a peek behind the scenes.
So there's lots of really good things about buying your first home, but there is a lot of pros if you are 40 or around that kind of age and buying your first home to not buy. And the biggest one is the bank's going to own you for a freaking long time, very close to your retirement. And you need to think, have I got enough time to pay off my mortgage and have enough time for the sprint?
Yeah.
Now, if you're going, James, what's the sprint? Check out the link. Ravi will put it somewhere around the screen or below to watch what the sprint is about. Pretty much having enough time to save enough for retirement.
Yeah. One of the other real factors there, if you are looking at buying at 40 and, if you do have kids and that sort of stuff, a lot of the times you are less flexible about where you can own. Your kids might already be in schools in an area or, you don't want them to shift or you want them to be in a particular school zone. That's really going to dictate the price of the property you can buy. So when we go through the case study, you're probably hearing a little bit like, oh, why are they buying such an expensive house? Why can't they go for an $800,000 townhouse? It's, when you're at that stage of life, you often can't do that.
Yeah, and you've been grinding for 20 years by this point. You go, I don't want to go into a one-bedroom unit with my 3 kids.
Yeah.
It's completely understandable. The other piece to that is we talk to first home buyers all the time that your first home is not your forever home. In this scenario, it's potentially your forever home, right?
It is. So let's jump into that scenario. James, give me the headlines.
Cool. So your boys love a case study. So we're going to talk about, and this is clients that have come in this exact situation where should they buy or should they continue renting? So let me run you through the numbers. So they're both 40 years old. They've got 2 kids. They earn $150,000 each. So good household income, $300,000. Their expenses day to day per annum, excluding rent and the mortgage, is $90,000 a year. So groceries, holidays, Christmas, utilities, their F45 membership, all in. They've currently got $350,000 in cash, which is quite a lot of cash. Half of this is a recent inheritance, though. So it's a combination of their savings plus their recent inheritance. They rent for $900 a week. If they were to buy, they would be looking at a home for about $1.55 million. So, Mike, if they were to buy, what would that look like? Yeah,
cool. So, look, the mortgage is going to be $1.2 million. And if we run some quick math on that, it's just over $7,000 a month, or $7,150. They will pay $1.39 million of interest on that $1.2 million mortgage. Let me roll that back just one time.
Say it one more time.
$1.39 million worth of interest on that $1.2 million loan. That is astounding. So look, you're paying 2.16 times the size of the mortgage in interest. Bank's got to make some money somewhere, you know what I mean?
Those record profits, where do you think they're coming from? Also, this is everybody. You pay a lot of interest compared to the size of the value of the mortgage.
Yeah.
It is what it is. The other point to point out here is the mortgage repayments are very close to double what their rent would be.
Yeah.
So that's a huge, huge difference.
Cool.
But if we fast forward this based on their budget, based on their income, it'll take them about 20 years to pay off their mortgage, which means they'll be debt-free at 60. So they'll have the value of their KiwiSaver, but all they've got at 60 is, when they're getting ready for retirement, is a debt-free home and some money in their KiwiSaver. That gives them 5 years to do the sprint to retire at 65. Their KiwiSaver plus their savings in that 5 years equates to $1.3 million. And Mike, you might go, $1.3 million sounds pretty good. They still run out of money by 85.
Yeah, and I think that's the really sort of key point here is, we'll get to the end, but you've just got to think about the numbers. Just because the social pressure is you've got to buy a house to be successful, that does not mean it's the right thing for you to do.
Yep.
So if we look at the alternate to that, the renting situation, let's say their day-to-day expenses are $90K plus rent of $45K per annum. So that's $135K per year. But remember, they're not paying rates. They're paying a little bit of insurance. They're not really paying too much maintenance on the property either. This is going to be a completely different scenario.
And if we come back to that maintenance point as well, you think about when the roof goes, or the bathrooms or the kitchen, you need to do the outdoor area. It does add up. There's always something to do on your owner occupied. There's always a fence, my friend, that needs to be fixed.
Yeah,
there's always something happening. So in this scenario, if they continued renting, they've still got $350,000 to allocate and grow their wealth. The plan is certainly not to leave that money in the bank. We need to deploy that capital, get our 350,000 soldiers, getting them to battle, getting them to work so we can grow our wealth. So they've caught up with old mate Mike. We're still buying property, but we're not buying houses to live in. We're buying investment properties.
Yep.
So they bought two $800,000 properties with a 20% deposit on each. We've assumed a 4% rental yield. They are paying principal and interest because they've got the cash flow to do it in terms of their income and their expenses. They've got the spare amount of money.
Yep.
The topping up those two properties at a 6% interest rate is about $40,000 a year of their money is going towards paying down debt. And we're going with that strategy because there's two ways to grow your wealth in terms of capital gains on property. Waiting for house prices to go up, but also paying down debt. So why not do both?
Yeah. And really tempting for everyone to just put those properties on interest only, but you've got to be making the right decisions here. You've got to be paying down that P&I. So if we look at their cash flows, after tax and KiwiSaver, their income's going to be $219,000 per year. $135,000 is their base expenses. We've got $40K topping up the property, and then we've got $35,000, which we're going to be putting into managed funds.
And do not sleep on the managed funds component. Don't muck around with sharesies in terms of direct investing, picking companies. Works out for about 4% of people, making sure you're finding something nice and well diversified, lined up with your goals in your time frame.
Yeah.
But that is with a property, you can't sell a bedroom to go on a holiday. You don't have access to cash. You need to sell a property to really ever get money back. That managed fund is a very important diversification play in the property. So if we fast forward to by the time they're 65, so we've got in this scenario where they could actually retire earlier if they wanted to, but to keep it kind of apples with apples, I have put it in a slight variation though. They've worked part-time from 55 to 65. They want to keep working. They want to kind of stay on the tools, stay interested. But by 65, they've got $1 million in managed funds, 2 debt-free investment properties that provide them with a passive income of $95,000 per annum. They never have to sell either of those property. So it's a really nice legacy play for the kids.
Yeah.
They've got the income they need for the rest of their life to maintain their lifestyle, pay the rent, and they've got $4 million in managed funds by the time they're 100. So they're not even accessing spending their capital. So financially, substantially better situation by renting and deploying capital well.
Yeah. And I guess really what we're trying to say here and the learnings from this is, you know, whatever decision you make, you've got to run the numbers. You've got to look at what's going to be better for you long term. And again, just because everyone else tells you should do something, just because the social sign of success is one thing, doesn't mean that's for you. You know, the stigma around renting in New Zealand is pretty big, and it's not like that around other countries in the world where they've far higher rental rates. You're talking the likes of like Singapore and Europe, Germany, Italy, those
Hong
sorts of
Kong,
places.
like 50%.
And so a lot of Kiwis, home ownership is really important. That's fine. You just need to know the numbers.
Yeah. And once again, as Mike said, we're not saying it is bad to buy a house at 40. We're not saying it's bad to keep renting at 40. What this whole podcast is, the journey we are going on, is education. So making an informed decision at the end of the day. And when you take action, whether you achieve financial freedom in your goals, either way, that's fine. But if you buy your first home in this scenario, don't expect to retire at 55 because that's not the game you're playing. Yeah. Thank you very much for joining us. Please make sure to give us a subscribe, give us a review. We'll catch you next week.
Cheers.